After nearly 30 years, the Air Force is hitting reset on its electromagnetic warfare game with the EA-37B. The Compass Call, as it is also known, is a modified business jet that people in the know are already calling a game changer.
Ship's as fast as it's boasting. We ought to do well.
Like the Millennium Falcon, the EA-37B is not the best looking ship on the ramp, but it's fast, long range, and has a lot of special modifications for jamming, spoofing, degrading, and generally messing up the radar, comms, and tracking systems that enemy armies rely on in modern conflict. So today, let's break down why the US Air Force is suddenly taking electromagnetic warfare off the back burner, why some experts say the Pentagon needs to do more to meet the challenge of the invisible battlefield, and how the Air Force got into this situation in the first place. When it comes to combat, electromagnetic warfare is basically the closest thing we have to a wizard fight. It relies on arcane knowledge, invisible forces of nature, and unintelligible signals, but it can have just as devastating an effect as a bomb or a bullet. Some of the earliest examples of electromagnetic warfare happened way back in 1904 when Russia jammed Japanese radio signals being used to coordinate the shelling of Port Arthur during the Russo-Japanese War. So began the cat and mouse game. As new technologies for radar, communication, and navigation came up, so did new ways of jamming, spoofing, or otherwise screwing with them. By the time British radars were tracking Nazi bombers during the Battle of Britain in 1940, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill has started calling the technology race, and particularly electromagnetic warfare, the Wizard War. That wizard warfare is even more important now as GPS, satellite communications, and cyber operations become inextricable parts of conflict. That's especially true in the air, where you can't run an effective mission without long-range communication, navigation, and targeting. Electromagnetic warfare breaks down into three categories: electromagnetic attack, protection, and support. Today, we're focusing on attack, or EA for short, which often means jamming enemy signals. The most basic form of jamming is to flood a frequency with noise so that nobody can use it. But EA can also mean inserting false information into enemy networks, or zapping enemy systems with lasers and microwave weapons, or just outright destroying them with anti-radiation missiles that lock onto enemy radar. But to spoof, track, or jam an enemy radar system, you need a deep understanding of how that system works. You also need to adapt as that system changes, which we will get to later on. Experts say the Air Force's current EA platform, the EC-130H, also called the Compass Call, won't be enough in a fight against China. The plane tops out at about 300 miles per hour and a 25,000-foot ceiling, which means you can't fly as far or as fast as most jets. The low ceiling also means you have a smaller horizon, which shortens your range for messing with enemy signals. That brings us to the EA-37B, which is a modified Gulfstream G550 business jet. This updated Compass Call has a range of about 5,000 miles, more than twice that of the EC-130. It can also fly at about 770 miles per hour and cruise around 45,000 feet. In other words, it flies twice as fast and twice as high as its legacy. While the crew is smaller at 9 airmen compared to 13, an anonymous Air Force officer close to the program told our friends at the War Zone that the higher speed, range, and ceiling should give the 37 a much better chance of survival in a war with China, which is why the Air Force opted to buy the new aircraft and retire the EC-130. Now, after seeing it a few times, you're probably wondering what those weird bumps are on the plane. According to the anonymous Air Force officer, those big bulges on the side of the fuselage are basically big transmit antennas and amplifiers that boost its power. That boost in power means that the EA-37B can reach targets farther away than smaller platforms, like even the Growler can. Much of the transmitters, receivers, and computers are just simply being taken out of the EC-130 and put back into the EA-37. That saves on time and training for crews, but the Air Force is also working on a new software system that will let crews keep pace with the latest threats. The anonymous Air Force officer described a software-defined radio architecture that works kind of like an iPhone and an app store. He said, so what this iPhone on a plane will do is hook into our transmitters, and basically the programs would run on it and we'd be able to counter emerging threats quicker because all you have to do is update the App Store, push a software update to the app to get the increased capability to counter radar, comms, things like that. The current system can take months to field a solution for a new threat. A 2023 report by the RAND Corporation explained that the military could once afford to take months or even years to update its electromagnetic operations, but now things are just way more complicated. The report said advanced adversary radar systems create a challenging electromagnetic operating environment by using waveforms, signal parameters, modes of operation, power and sensitivity, and other characteristics to reduce detectability. Because waveforms are becoming more complex, dozens of parameters are sometimes needed to reliably distinguish one emitter from another. I'm going to go a little bit off script and just kind of say how I think about this, and maybe it's wrong, but it helps me think about radars and transmissions and signals and radios and all that, but I kind of see it like voices, where you can go super duper deep or super duper high, or you can go really low and quiet or really loud. Every transmitter has a different voice, and they can change it and modulate it and change the rise and inflection to kind of throw off things that are listening for it. That's how I see it anyways. If you got a better way, hit the comments up and let me know, because I like to simplify these things, but now I need to get back to the script, so let's go get it. There's lots of different things like ultra-wideband radars that are sometimes too faint to detect with traditional gear, digitally modulated radars that are tricky to pick out from commercial communication systems, and software-defined radars that shift rapidly between never-before-seen waveforms. Thus, RAND went on to say electromagnetic spectrum operations are an arms race between ever-evolving threat capabilities and ever-improving methods of identifying and countering those threats. Like with most things in modern warfare, we can see this playing out in Ukraine. Brian Clark, a national security and electronic warfare expert at the Hudson Institute, told us Ukrainian troops are using software-defined radios to maneuver through the electromagnetic spectrum. He said they're very versatile when it comes to changing the waveforms and frequencies, which allows you to be more capable of circumventing jamming, and if you're jamming, you can hunt for the signals you're trying to jam more effectively. RAND called on the Air Force to chop its reprogramming time down to minutes or seconds because that's how fast threats might adapt. Someday, the computers on the EA-37B might be able to analyze and respond to a new kind of signal in real time while flying a mission. The Compass Call 2.0, and I'm just throwing that 2.0 on there to make sure you don't confuse it with the EC-130, may in fact become something like an EM command center. Nicholas O'Donoghue, a senior engineer at RAND, pointed out that the Air Force is developing electromagnetic battle management, which he described as a suite of software tools to support planning, execution, and battle management of non-kinetic effects. Some of that will probably be hosted on the 37, which means it'd be better able to coordinate operations in the EM spectrum across the joint force. The upshot to all this is that the EA-37B is better positioned to throw a wrench in enemy air defenses and command and control systems than previous aircraft. But while it is faster and longer range than the EC-130, it's not as maneuverable, and it doesn't have as many defenses as something like the Growler, so it's not the kind of aircraft that will escort a strike package deep into enemy territory. Instead, the EA-37B is more of a standoff platform, which means it works beyond the range of enemy defenses. The crew can also gather and analyze signals intelligence so that they can help friendly leaders make decisions while undermining the enemy's ability to do the same. Still, O'Donoghue said it's not uncommon for EA-37Bs and Growlers or even the big RC-135 reconnaissance planes to work together on a mission. Like we always say in other videos, not everything can do everything, and just like with layered defenses, platforms and combined arms work together to enhance each other's individual capabilities while masking those shortcomings. At this point, you may be wondering, well, what about the F-35? Doesn't it have a ton of electromagnetic witchcraft on it? And it does, but not as much as dedicated platforms like the Growler or the EA-37B. Justin Bronk of the Royal United Services Institute said, "The U.S. Air Force still heavily draws on the U.S. Navy's 5 expeditionary land-based EA-18G squadrons for force protection in high-threat areas, even where F-35 and F-22 are in use. The same goes for collaborative combat aircraft, think drone fighter jets or loyal wingmen, which the Air Force wants to use for high-risk electromagnetic attack missions. Drones present more options for commanders, but the Compass Call has the space for more powerful EA weapons and the gas to carry them around for longer than a drone wingman does. And while we're talking about gas, one limitation for the EA-37B is that it can't refuel in the air. But the anonymous Air Force officer said the 37 already has about 11 hours of flight time, which is about as far as you can go without running into crew duty limitations anyways, and it still gives you a longer loiter time than something like a Growler. The Air Force got its first EA-37B in August 2024, and the fleet grew to 5 by May 2025. It's also already a combat veteran, having taken part in Operation Epic Fury earlier this year, but like with the E-7 Wedgetail, leaders and lawmakers are fighting over money. The Air Force originally set out to buy just 12 EA-37Bs, and that's not quite a one-to-one replacement for its 14 EC-130s. That fell to 10 because of budget strain, but Congress pushed it back to 12 in the 2026 defense funding bill. Now, in its 2027 budget request, the Air Force bumped its request to 22 aircraft through 2031, nearly double the original ask. But even that might not be enough, since A, the Pacific Ocean is enormous, and B, there is a very high demand for EA aircraft, even when we're not at war, which honestly is practically never, and then C, some of those 22 aircraft are going to be committed to training or testing at any given time. Defense policy expert and former F-16 pilot Heather Penny said on a podcast for the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies, "I would actually say the real requirement for potential multi-theater conflict is far more than 22. We probably need upwards of 30. We need to have the numbers to provide the scale and scope of dominating the electromagnetic spectrum across the Pacific and anywhere else we operate." But not everybody feels that way. Brian Clark, the Hudson Institute expert that we quoted earlier, said 22 EA-37Bs would already be a big expansion from the 14 EC-130s the Air Force operated for decades. And as air defenses get more formidable, EA-37Bs may become obsolete. He said, "I think people who argue that it's not enough are not thinking about the fact that the scenarios in which you're going to be able to employ it effectively are shrinking. The air threats are going to get worse, so trying to fly a business jet in an area with those air defenses is just not going to be realistic." But there's plenty of gray in between peace and war, and the electromagnetic spectrum fits right in there because superpowers can poke each other in the EM world without turning buildings into rubble. This was a huge thing during the Cold War, where US aircraft deliberately flew along Soviet borders to get them to turn on their radars so the air crews could figure out how they worked. We reportedly did something similar before snatching Maduro in Venezuela, and again before striking Iran in Epic Fury. With tensions between the US and China as high as they are, it's easy to imagine our government would want to do something similar with the EA-37B. That is where we are today, but to truly understand, really understand why this aircraft is so important, we need to understand what its predecessors have done on recent battlefields. Both the Air Force and the Navy flew electromagnetic warfare missions in the 20th century, but by the 1990s, two platforms that really stood out were the Air Force's EF-111A Raven and the EA-6B Prowler flown by the Navy and Marine Corps. The EF-111A was a F-111 aardvark modified with 4 tons of EW gear, including a bomb bay full of electronics and a 16-foot-long radome on its belly. A typical mission for the so-called Sparkvark, which is just an outstanding nickname for an aircraft, was to fly alongside of or ahead of the strike aircraft to jam enemy radars. I can't help but imagine what those two-person crews in the Sparkvark were subjected to as far as really fun and totally not dangerous transmissions. Like the Raven, the Prowler was also adapted from an existing aircraft, in this case the A-6 Intruder, and it jammed enemy air defenses to clear the way for strikers. The Navy wrote that electromagnetic jamming, also called defense suppression, was crucial to the success of all aviation missions during the Gulf War, and if Navy defense suppression wasn't available, the missions didn't fly. But the Cold War ended shortly after Desert Storm, and Congress wanted to trim the defense budget. The Raven was way more expensive to operate than the EA-6B, and the Air Force thought that with its fancy new stealth aircraft, they wouldn't need EW platforms anymore. We'll let the viewer, you, decide on the wisdom of that opinion, but right or wrong, the Navy was now in charge of tactical EA, and it would remain that way for the next 3 decades. Prowlers and their successor, the EA-18G Growler, were one of the unsung heroes of the global war on terror. Whether the target was Iraqi Republican Guard, the Taliban, ISIS, or Muammar Gaddafi's regime, Prowlers and Growlers blocked radio broadcasts, played havoc with cell phone traffic, jammed the garage door openers and burner phones used to remotely detonate IEDs, and scrambled enemy radars and communications networks. That continues today off the coast of Yemen and Iran, where Growlers have shot down enemy drones, destroyed a Houthi Hind helicopter, and probably done a lot of sneaky electromagnetic warfare stuff that they'll just never tell us about. Despite the Navy taking the bulk of this mission, the Air Force is still on the scene. In fact, the largest continuously deployed Air Force unit in Afghanistan was the 41st Electronic Combat Squadron, which flies the EC-130H Compass Call. Unlike the Prowler's crew of 4 and the Growler's crew of 2, the EC-130H has a crew of 13, 9 of whom do the whole electromagnetic warfare thing, and they even include linguists who can interpret what the bad guys are saying. This really came in handy over Afghanistan, where the EC-130 used radio signals to track down insurgents that other aircraft couldn't see. They also took down early warning systems in advance of a raid, and they warned special forces when they spotted Taliban fighters right next to them. Retired Colonel Chris Kirschman, a former squadron commander, recalled one rescue mission in 2001 for an interview with Air Force Times. It was just us and the SEALs and the Army helicopters that were going in because it was too dangerous for other aircraft. The SEALs said, "We're not going to go up there unless Compass Call comes with us." So the EA-37B and EC-130H may not be the sexiest aircraft out there. Kids and even adults probably don't have models of them on their shelves. But without these aircraft and the unique, truly unique capabilities that they bring to the fight, all those other sexy aircraft and their fancy pilots don't get to do what they get to do, and ultimately the troops on the ground suffer for it. So here's to all those unsexy aircraft fighting the invisible battles on invisible battlefields. So as always, go ahead and jump down in the comments and let us know what you think about this electromagnetic warfare or anything like this, because this is a really awesome topic. It just doesn't get a whole lot of coverage, and so this is our chance to bring coverage to it instead of just complaining about it. So let us know what you think down below. And now it is channel update time. David Roza wrote this script, and he did a great job and even threw in a Star Wars reference, which I've never seen Star Wars, but I'm going to trust him about the Millennium Falcon there. And I might have even said it wrong. I've heard it said like Falcon, I don't know. And Savvy, who's a team of people, I saw that in another thing, edited the video. I do have a correction. It's a pretty big correction, and I feel kind of dumb for not realizing this when I was doing the research for it, but in the video that we did about the Grizzly system and a lot of other videos that we've done about anti-drone stuff, I mentioned the APKWS-2 rockets being laser guided. In 2025, BAE Systems designed a IR seeker, an infrared seeker, for the APKWS-2 rockets. To my knowledge, well, what it'll do is that will allow it to not just be laser guided. Laser guided works great unless there's like bad weather or the beam gets interrupted or you don't have line of sight. With an IR seeker, it can just go and do its thing. It's kind of a really big capability. I just haven't heard of it being fielded anywhere yet. They came out with it in 2025, but I haven't heard of it being used. So it's out there, and it does bring down the cost per kill still from, I think an APKWS-2 rocket is $35,000 with the laser seeker variant. I'm not sure how much an IR, the addition of IR will be, but there are other options that exist. The point of that whole video was just say one thing can't do it all, and things like Grizzly or other systems that aren't APKWS-2 rockets can be useful too. There's a lot more to the anti-drone conversation than just cost. We've beat this to death, but we still have to beat it to death because it's honestly like a pet peeve of mine. But anyways, that's the correction that we got. That one came through comments, emails. I do appreciate it. If you have any other corrections, email me at kyle.gunn@taskandpurpose.com. Put corrections in the subject line so I can find it. My inbox is a fucking disaster. It's a mess. I don't even want to look at it, but I do. And it's always going to be a mess. I've just kind of surrendered. I've given up. So put corrections. And if you want to just email me and say, hey, or you need to like vent, rant to somebody, you can do that too. Everything that you tell us, since we're journalists, is anonymous. We consider it protected sources and all that stuff. So don't go like divulging classified information. But if you want to talk about something, go ahead and hit me up at kyle.gunn@taskandpurpose.com. That's all I have for today. Honestly, I hope I kept that short. I'm Kyle, your friendly ginger man. I don't know, trying it out. The beard, people are like, oh, you're not a ginger. This beard gives it away. You should see my youngest son. He's ginger as fuck. But anyways, that's all I got. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you next time.